guys, my name is Nate. Welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to do a kind of like little wrap-up video for 2023, looking back at some of the things I read, some of my goals, and what went on, what I was really happy about, that sort of stuff. I will be using some questions from a tag in this video. I think the tag was created by Destiny Sidwell. I will leave a link to her first video with that tag in it. I won't be answering all the questions because some of them just aren't really relevant to me, but I thought I would take inspiration from some and answer some of them out. I've got some books to kind of talk through some stuff. I will start with some of the later questions, which is looking at your Goodreads reading goal reflection and your 2024 goal, and then also kind of talking about just a kind of wrap up in general for 2023. So for my Goodreads reading goal for 2023, I set it at 80 books, which was quite an achievement of an idea for me to go for. In 2022, I set it at 40 books and only read 38. And the idea for me setting 80 books with that, I would read 80 volumes of manga and then 80 books. I do include manga and audiobooks and all of that on my Goodreads, so all of that combined together is what my intention was for my 80 books. However, I managed to read 140 books in the year, so I way surpassed my original goal, and I am so pleased with that. I think I hit it in about September or October, and so it was just absolutely floored by that for myself. Like my previous reading years have been like 38. I think the year before that I read maybe 40, but that was mostly manga. So yeah, I was so happy with that. And for a breakdown in kind of the stats in that, I have it written down here. Out of those 140 books, 56 of them were books that I read physically, 34 were audio only books, most of which I listened to a few on Audible, but most of which I got out from my library. So I'm really happy with that as well, that I was using my library. This was the first time that I've actually done that. I signed up, I think in December 2022, I signed up, and I was like, oh, there's this app now, because the only time before that I'd had was like my library when I was a kid, where you had to go in, you had to find books. The idea that I could just have all these audiobooks available to me from my library was mind-blowing, which sounds stupid, but it was mind-blowing, and I was really happy about that. So yeah, 34 audiobooks, and then I also listened to 8 books that were mixed, so between audiobook and physical book. I do think going forward in 2024, I'm going to try and do that a bit more, because I think at the start I was a bit resistant to it. I was like, if I'm reading a book, I want to physically read it or I want to listen to it, and that's it. But I think it will really help me get through some of my physical TBR if I get the audiobook out for them and do it mixed. And also I think sometimes it definitely adds to the experience. One I've been having recently is I've been listening to Cemetery Boys, and there is so much Spanish related words or just accents that I would not translate in if I was reading the book, but hearing it is just so much more authentic to how I guess it's written. And so I think in circumstances especially like that, I'm really going to be trying to do mixed media a bit more. But I am also going to be making sure that I am not forcing myself to listen to an audiobook if I don't like the narrator. If I'm struggling with the narration, or if I think the book itself I potentially would enjoy more if I physically read, I am going to be being a bit more strict with that, because I did push myself through in some audiobooks when I could have maybe stopped. And then I also read 42 manga. So altogether that makes 140. So that whole stat I was so happy with and so impressed with. So yeah, and I just had a great year. So for 2024, I will be doing a separate video where I go over my goals and like all the little bits that I want to do in them. But my actual Goodreads goal, I'm going to actually set at 150, which is setting myself up quite a lot more, 10 more than I achieved this year. However, I'm going to be putting a big focus on not only trying to read down my physical TBR, but also trying to read down my physical manga TBR. And so I want to try and read at least 100 volumes of manga this year, which is achievable. It's like 2 a week, and they take me about an hour, if that, to read. So achievable. And when I get into a series, I do then want to continue it on quite quicker. So I do think I will be able to do that. So that is what that goal is set at. But yeah, all my other kind of 2024 goals, I'm going to leave for a 2024 specific video. So that will be coming out a week or so after this video, I think. So now I will go over some of the questions from the tag video. So the first one being the most disappointing book of the year. So for this one, I will be kind of using 2 books for them. They were kind of disappointing for the same reason, in that I'd heard so much hype about them, and they're quite popular books. And so I had high expectations for them, and they didn't meet those expectations. And those books were The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake and Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I liked Daisy Jones and the Six more, and I think for me, Daisy Jones and the Six was just disappointing in that I really didn't like the characters, the main 2 characters, and so I felt no connection to those characters in the book, and I didn't really root for them. And so for me, that was disappointing. And I also think the format got old for me personally very quickly. About halfway through the book, I was so done with the format. I wanted more than that, and I don't feel like I got that because of that. So for me, that book was disappointing. It had been spoken about, and all I'd already heard about it was extremely positive stuff. I think when you start looking, you do see people that criticize it a bit more, but from the people that I had been exposed to had only really loved it, and I was not one of them. I do think that's a book that I potentially would have enjoyed more as an audiobook format, since it was essentially just people having a conversation throughout the whole book, or people having like being interviewed throughout the whole book. That book was disappointing. And then The Atlas 6, I think, was disappointing because I liked the idea of it and I liked the premise. And again, people had spoken about it a lot, but I didn't enjoy the writing of The Atlas 6, and the book was just boring to me. With Daisy Jones and the Six, I liked some characters in it, and I did find, interesting stuff going on. And I thought the writing and the fleshing out of the characters was really good. But for The Atlas 6, for me, it was just bland. So that was disappointing. And I did enjoy, though, I will say, the audiobook of Atlas 6 in that all of the characters had different narrators. I did like that for the audiobook. Next was there an Underdog book of the year? For me, this is a book series, and that is the How to Train Your Dragon book series. This is a series that I have one more left. It's a 12-book series, and I have been listening to all of them on audio. David Tennant narrates them, and he does a fantastic job. And this is just a series that I don't really hear spoken about as much for books. Obviously, the movies are very well loved and very popular. The movies are very different from the books, and so I don't really hear, especially in like middle grade readers, I don't really hear anyone talking about this book series. It is a middle grade book series, and a lot of people I follow don't necessarily read middle grade, so potentially why I've not heard of them. But yeah, I just feel like it's been such a ride, it's been such a journey, and it's been so fun that I haven't really heard anyone speak about it. So this I consider, I guess, an Underdog book of the year. Obviously, it's not like an unheard of series because of the movies, and it is getting like a live action movie next year. But for the actual content of these books, I think there is so much potential in these books with these characters that are missed out in the movies, which I think is a bit of a shame. And so I think people could really enjoy them, especially David Tennant's narration is just so good. So yeah, I think that's a potential Underdog series for the year. It might not be, but yeah, I just don't hear anyone talking about it. And I think that's a really big shame because I've been loving that series this year. So then we have what is an overhyped book of the year. I'm going to have 2 books for this, and one book also relates to another question. So the first book I'm going to be putting on is Wuthering Heights. Now, when I say I think this is overhyped, I think it's not specifically about the whole book that I'm kind of using that context, but more of the fact that this has kind of been throughout my life, not just like on BookTube, but throughout my life been kind of presented as a tragic gothic love story. I wouldn't even really call this a love story, if I'm honest, after reading it. The romance in this story was so secondary and so removed from the main perspective that we get from the story and from the narrative, and also the characters in it. I don't felt like I could even feel their genuine love, because I just don't think it was like really romantic. It was a very, I think the gothic in it, I guess, comes through, and it just wasn't a love story for me. And I think this is how it's been touted as a book. So that's why I think it's overhyped, because people talk about it like a love story. And again, this isn't just like BookTube, like my whole life. This is, you know, Kathy and Heathcliff, especially because half of this book isn't even really about those characters. And also the whole of the book is technically not even from any of those characters' perspectives, because it's told from an outside person's POV, which I hate, because then I could feel no connection to these characters' love stories, because I'm not getting any of their romance from them. I'm just seeing it through a third party's eyes, who can obviously only tell stories of stuff that she herself witnessed. So yeah, overhyped in the sense that this is, I don't think is a romance at all. I think the actual book and some of the content and some of that stuff was actually quite interesting, and I guess maybe for its time it might have been considered a romance, but I also don't think so, because you do have books around this time that I think are more romantic. Jane Eyre, for instance, is around obviously the same time. It's by Charlotte Bronte, and the romance in that is so much more explicit and forefront and one of a focus of the story. Again, I wouldn't say it's a romance book. I would say it's more of a character development book, but the romance in it is so much more obvious, where the romance in this is so secondary and so removed that yeah, I would not, that's why I'm touting this as a hyped book for a romance. The second book that I'm saying is overhyped also goes with the question, the most frustrating book of the year that I read, and that is Conversation with Friends by Sally Rooney. I really didn't like this book. If you have, I don't know if my review's gone up for it just yet. I think it has. I hated this book, honestly. One, I think it's overhyped in that I don't really get why people, even like the writing, I didn't even think the writing was particularly great. The not having speech marks was the most infuriating writing choice, but also frustrating because I did not like the character choices. The characters were bland. Yeah, I think it's overhyped. I think it frustrated the hell out of me. I didn't enjoy this book. I don't think I would carry on with something from Sally Rooney again, unless my sister has read one that she particularly thought I might more enjoy if the characters were a bit more interesting. But for me, this was overhyped and frustrating, and yeah, did not enjoy it. From frustrating, we'll go to what I think is the happiest book that I've read this year. And so for this one, I'm not going to say necessarily the book itself is the happiest book, but it's kind of more the way that I felt while reading it. For me, that is The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axie O. This was fairy tale-esque, and it gave me, it's I think touted as having like a Ghibli vibe. Yeah, like someone here has touted it. The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea is a magical feminist retelling of a classic Korean legend, perfect for fans of Uprooted and Miyazaki's Spirited Away. And it gave me those warm, whimsical, Spirited Away feelings, and I really, really liked that. So even though I don't think it's necessarily the best book ever, the way that I felt while reading it, especially like the latter chapters of the book, just felt so like warm, and I was very happy while reading it, and I found it so easy to read and enjoyable to immerse myself in. And yeah, it left me with like warm, cozy fuzzy feelings, and I really enjoyed that. For me, this was like one of my happiest books of the year. It's one that I look back on with such fond memories of remembering reading it and how I felt while reading it and the joy that it brought me while I was reading it. The book itself isn't the happiest book, especially like the beginning sections, but like towards the end, and I thought it was really enjoyable and really fun. So this one would be my happiest book of the year. Also, I won't do all of the covers that I loved this year, but this would definitely fall into one of the covers that I really liked this year. I think it is beautiful. It has like beautiful on the back as well. So yeah, this is one of the pretty covers that I think of this year. Another book that I did really enjoy the cover of is She Drove Me Crazy. I really like illustrated people on covers, and so I just thought this one was really cute. This was a cover buy. The book itself was fine, but I think the actual cover of the book is really cute. So an unpopular book that you loved. Now, I don't know how unpopular this book would be necessarily, but I think more the series is kind of spoken about unpopular compared to its like companion follow-on series, and that for me would be Shadow and Bone. I really enjoyed the Shadow and Bone trilogy. I don't think it's the best written trilogy, and I think the characters have flaws, but I just really enjoyed the series. I had such a good time reading it, and I think because I did like our main cast of characters and I thought the journey was really interesting, I really enjoyed this. I know this book kind of, the whole series kind of gets put down a lot compared to Six of Crows, which people much prefer, and it's kind of set in the same universe, so there are obviously comparisons always going to be made, but I just loved the Six of Bones, the Shadow and Bone series, and so yeah, I had a really good time reading it. I don't necessarily think it's unpopular because people know about it a lot and people talk about it a lot, and there are other people that I've seen that really enjoyed it, but yeah, I think in comparison to like its Six of Crows counterpart, I think it's unpopular in that sense, and so for that I really liked it. Kind of another one in that vein would be The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. This, I think with Hunger Games fans especially, I think is quite mixed. I think some people really enjoyed it and some people absolutely hate it. I'm in the really enjoyed it camp. I thought this was a really nice addition to this world. I really liked that it was a Snow origin story, but it didn't try and paint him kind of like a victim. Even when necessarily bad things happened to him, it wasn't like a sad backstory. Like you could kind of throughout the whole of the book see his character, so it kind of wasn't like his character was made to be this horrible character because of tragic things that happened to him. I think throughout the book you could see that character already existed, and it was like the events of the book kind of sped along the creation of this character, if that makes sense. I didn't ever really feel bad for him because everything was kind of a consequence of his own actions, and then also because you were getting his insights. He wasn't a sympathetic character, like, and I don't think it was ever tried out to be that he was this sympathetic guy that had this tragic backstory, which is why he ended up how he was. There was always those seeds for that, and so for that I really enjoyed that. I liked this expansion of this kind of dystopian world, how the world developed from what we knew in the Hunger Games, from kind of where it started, especially the Hunger Games element, and so yeah, I really liked Ballads of Songbirds and Snakes. Again, I don't know sure how unpopular it is, but I had heard some quite divisive things about it, and for me it was a win, and I really enjoyed it. So now doing books that I read this year that I would reread. I mean, I'm a big rereader anyway, so I would love to reread some of these. For instance, the last book in the Lorraine Legacy series I would probably read. I would probably reread some of the Cassandra Clare books that I've read. I'd probably read Shadow and Bone. But some specific books here that I have that I wanted to talk about was Warm Bodies by Isaac Marone. This is probably one of my favorite books of the year, one of the probably most surprising books of the year for me. I really enjoyed this. I would absolutely be rereading this in the future, and I actually want to annotate it. It's the first book that I've ever felt that I wanted to like annotate, first fiction book. I just think it's had some lovely quotes in it, and I just really enjoyed the story of this, and it really took me by surprise. This is a series, and I'm still on the fence about whether I want to carry on with the series because I don't feel like it was originally set out or intended to be a series. It felt like after the movie's popularity, a series was written. I don't know if that's 100% true. I'm making that up. As a standalone book, I just really enjoyed this, so I absolutely do want to reread this in the future. Another one I think that I would really love to reread would be Eleanor Ophelia Is Completely Fine. This book really surprised me. It's a literary fiction book, and I really enjoyed this story in terms of the character development and growth we see for Eleanor throughout this book. I think it's laid out really well, and it's, yeah, my first kind of exposure to a book that isn't really a fantasy or a crime book. It's kind of just about this character's everyday life, what she's going through, her journey and her development, and so I think for that was something I found really interesting, and I think Eleanor is really lovely, flawed, and written so well that you can really read her as a character, but I think she's likable even though she has such flaws, and she is quite a harsh critic of a character. I really enjoyed this, and I would love to reread it again in the future. And then we have Her Dark Winds by Melissa Salisbury. I also really liked this book. This again has a kind of whimsical, fantasy, mythical, it's a Greek myth book, and it has that kind of elements in it, and so I think I would like to reread this in the future. It wasn't like my favorite read of the year, but I just thought it was like whimsical enough, and I really enjoyed it, and I really liked our main character's journey and her growth, so it'd be really nice to like reread it again and just kind of get fresh perspective. I'd probably give it a couple of years before I reread it to kind of then feel like I get it anew, but I did still quite enjoy this book. Also, the How to Train Your Dragon series, I would actually like to physically read them, I think, in the future. I read the first one physically because I owned it, but I listened to the rest, and so I think it would be nice in the future to get a box set maybe of all 12 and reread them. So yeah, I think I would like to reread those as well in the future. Most series I would probably reread if I read the whole series. Anything I read kind of one or two of, I'm not that bothered about, but if I'm reading a whole series, I would probably reread it again in the future. So the last question I will do from this tag, which will kind of be wrapping up the video, is my lowest rated and highest rated from Goodreads, and if I think those reflections are deserved. But for my highest rated is actually a manga. It is the Full Metal edition of Full Metal Alchemist. Yeah, I absolutely agree. This high rating, because I think this manga is phenomenal. It's a 5-star manga for me. So yes, I do agree. The book that is the highest in that is actually the 11th 7th book in the How to Train Your Dragon series, which I also 100% agree with. I rated it 5-star. I thought it was so good. So yeah, 100% agree with both those ratings. My lowest rated book is Mr. Darcy Vampire. This was a 2.8, I think something. And yes, I also agree with that. I gave this a 2-star. It wasn't that great. And then the other one was Balcony of Fog by, I think, Richard Shapiro, I think his name was. I can't 100% remember. And I rated that 1 star. So I also agree that I think that lowest rating is quite justified. It was just an odd, weird, oddly written, hard, yeah, no, not for me book. And clearly other people also agree. So yes, I do agree with those 2 books for the year. So this is the end of my little wrap up for 2023. Like I said, I do have a 2024 goals and challenges and all of this stuff that I'm hoping to do. That'll be coming out soon. I don't really have much of a top 10 list or something throughout the year. I think maybe 2024, I'll maybe think about that a bit more. I didn't really have much thoughts for that this year, so I just kind of left it. So I just thought this would be a nice video to wrap up the end of 2023. It's January now as I'm posting it, so it's going to be a bit late, but that's fine. And yeah, see you into the new year with like this nice wrap up and then looking back and all of that. Thank you guys for watching this video, and I'll see you again hopefully soon.